My name is Rabbi Eliyahu Steinberg, and for over 5 decades, I dedicated my life to the study and teaching of the Torah. I served as the head rabbi of Congregation Ahavat Shalom in Brooklyn, a community I cherished and led with unwavering conviction. My life revolved around faith, tradition, and a deep commitment to preserving the legacy of my ancestors. But on a cold January night in 2024, everything changed. A routine evening at home turned into a moment that forever altered my understanding of life, death, and the divine. For 14 minutes and 16 seconds, I was clinically dead. During that time, I crossed into a realm beyond this world, a place where every assumption I had ever held about faith, the Messiah, and the afterlife was challenged. What I experienced wasn't just a near-death experience. It was a revelation. But before I share what I encountered, you need to understand the life I led before that moment. I was born into an Orthodox Jewish family in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, a community steeped in tradition. My father, Rabbi Moshe Steinberg, was a renowned scholar who fled Europe just before the Holocaust, carrying with him a deep commitment to the Torah. My mother, Miriam, came from a long line of rabbis stretching back to 18th century Lithuania. From the moment I could speak, my path seemed predestined. My parents instilled in me a love for the Torah, and I excelled in my studies from an early age. By the time I turned 13, I could recite entire portions of the Torah from memory. My teachers affectionately called me the Living Scroll. At my bar mitzvah, I delivered a speech on the messianic prophecies in Isaiah that drew scholars from across New York. By 18, I was already being groomed for leadership, and it was clear that my life would be devoted to serving the Jewish community. During my years at yeshiva, I immersed myself in the study of Jewish law and tradition. I spent countless nights debating the intricacies of halacha with my peers, often losing track of time as we pored over ancient texts. It was during this time that I met Rabbi Abraham Feldman, a man who would become my mentor and spiritual guide. Rabbi Feldman had a unique perspective on the Torah. While others focus on the letter of the law, he emphasized its spirit. The Torah isn't just a set of rules, he would say. It's a living conversation with the divine. His words stayed with me, shaping my approach to leadership and scholarship, though I would later come to understand them in ways I never expected. At the age of 32, I became the youngest head rabbi of Congregation Ahavat Shalom. Under my leadership, the synagogue flourished, growing from a modest congregation of 200 families to over 1,000. My weekly sermons were well attended, and I gained a reputation for my ability to apply ancient wisdom to modern challenges. Outwardly, I was successful. I was respected in my community, known for my thoughtful approach to Jewish law and my dedication to my faith. But privately, I sometimes wrestled with questions that I didn't dare voice aloud. As a scholar, I often encountered passages in the prophets that challenged my understanding. Isaiah 53, in particular, troubled me. The traditional interpretations of the suffering servant felt increasingly insufficient, but I buried my doubts beneath layers of scholarly commentary. One incident stands out vividly in my memory. About 5 years ago, a young man from my congregation, fresh out of Columbia University, came to me with questions about the messianic prophecies. He had been studying them independently and reached unsettling conclusions. Rather than engage with him honestly, I dismissed his concerns, handing him apologetic literature and sending him on his way. The disappointment in his eyes stayed with me for weeks. But instead of confronting my own questions, I pushed them aside, convincing myself that I had all the answers. It was a typical winter evening in January 2024. I had led morning prayers, taught my usual Talmud class, and spent the afternoon counseling a young couple preparing for marriage. That evening, I sat down for dinner with my wife, Rivka, in the quiet comfort of our Brooklyn home. The night began like any other, but a small, seemingly insignificant accident would set the stage for what was to come. During dinner, Rivka accidentally spilled water on our toaster while reaching for the salt. She suggested we replace it, but I insisted on fixing it myself. "It's just water," I said with confidence. "Once it dries, it'll be fine." I unplugged the toaster and left it to dry on the counter. Later that evening, long after Rivka had gone to bed, I decided to check if it was ready to use. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of a passing car. At 11:47 p.m., I tilted the toaster under a flashlight to inspect its interior. I noticed a few droplets of water clinging to the heating elements. Without thinking, I reached for a cloth to dry them. In my tired state, I didn't consider the possibility that water had seeped into the electrical components. The moment my hand touched the metal interior, a violent surge of electricity coursed through my body. The shock threw me backward, and my head struck the granite countertop. Everything went black, but this wasn't the darkness of sleep or unconsciousness. It was a void, an absolute emptiness that seemed to swallow all existence. My kitchen, my home, my very identity disappeared in an instant. In that void, something shifted. I felt myself being pulled upward, as if carried by an unseen force. The world I knew faded away, and I entered a realm that defied description, a place where every assumption I had ever held about life and death was challenged. It wasn't the warm, inviting light many describe in near-death experiences. Instead, it was a place of truth, raw, unfiltered, and undeniable. In the blackness, I felt suspended, neither falling nor rising, just existing in an infinite void. I couldn't see, hear, or feel anything in the physical sense, yet I was completely aware. It was as if my soul had been stripped of everything earthly and was left standing naked in the presence of something far greater. Then, without warning, I felt myself being pulled upward. It wasn't a physical sensation. It was more like an irresistible force drawing me towards something unseen. The void began to shift, and in the distance, I saw a faint glow. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. As I moved closer, I felt waves of emotion radiating from it. Love, peace, and an overwhelming sense of holiness. But there was also something else, something that made me hesitate. The light was pure, and I wasn't sure if I could stand before it without being consumed. As I entered the light, everything about me was laid bare. Every thought, every action, every word I had ever spoken. It was all there, displayed before me with perfect clarity. I didn't hear a voice, but I felt an undeniable presence communicating with me. It was as if the very essence of the light was speaking directly to my soul. "Eliyahu," it said, "do you understand the weight of your life?" At that moment, scenes from my past began to unfold around me. These weren't just memories. They were living, breathing moments that I was forced to relive in perfect detail. I saw the times I had comforted grieving families, taught children the Torah, and led prayers with sincerity and devotion. But I also saw the moments I had tried to forget. I saw the young man who had come to me with questions about the messianic prophecies, how I had dismissed him instead of engaging with him honestly. I saw the people I had judged too harshly, the times I had let pride dictate my actions, and the countless moments when I had ignored the quiet doubts in my heart. Each moment was shown to me not just from my perspective, but from the perspective of those I had affected. I felt their pain, their disappointment, their longing for truth. And then I saw something that shook me to my core. I was shown the ripple effects of my choices, the way a single action, whether good or bad, could impact countless lives. I saw how my dismissal of the young man's questions had led him to doubt not just me, but the faith itself. I saw how my unwillingness to confront my own doubts had created a barrier between me and the truth. Just when I thought I couldn't bear the weight of it any longer, the light shifted. Instead of focusing on my failings, it enveloped me in a love so pure, so complete, that it brought me to tears. This wasn't the distant academic concept of God that I had studied in the Torah. This was a presence, personal, immediate, and overwhelming. It was a love that saw me exactly as I was, with all my flaws and failures, and yet didn't condemn me. You are loved, the presence communicated, but love is not without responsibility. You were given the Torah not as a burden, but as a guide to bring light into the world. Have you fulfilled that purpose? I wanted to respond, to justify myself, but I couldn't. The truth was undeniable. I had spent so much of my life focused on the letter of the law that I had often missed its spirit. As I stood in the presence of the light, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The focus moved from my life to something far greater. I saw a figure approaching, a being of light who radiated authority, humility, and love all at once. I knew instantly who it was, though my mind struggled to accept it. It was the Messiah. But this wasn't the Messiah I had imagined or studied. This wasn't a political savior or a warrior king. This was someone who embodied sacrificial love, a love that had been rejected and misunderstood, yet remained steadfast. The light revealed to me that the Messiah had already come, and that his purpose wasn't to establish earthly power, but to reconcile humanity with the divine. In that moment, I understood Isaiah 53 in a way I never had before. The suffering servant wasn't a metaphor for Israel. It was a prophecy about the Messiah. I saw flashes of his life, the rejection he endured, the sacrifices he made, and the love he poured out even for those who despised him. I realized that everything I had dismissed, everything I had argued against, was true. The Messiah had come to fulfill the Torah, not abolish it. His life, death, and resurrection were the ultimate expression of God's love and justice. As the vision faded, I felt the presence of the light speaking to me once more. Eliyahu, it said, your time here is not yet over. You must return and share what you have seen. Tell them the truth, not as a condemnation, but as an invitation to seek and find. I wanted to stay, the peace, the love, the truth of this place. It was everything I had ever longed for, but I knew I had a mission to fulfill. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my kitchen. I was lying on the floor, my head pounding and my body weak. The clock on the wall read 12:01 a.m., just 14 minutes after the accident. But those 14 minutes felt like an eternity. I had experienced more in that brief span than I ever thought possible, and I knew my life would never be the same. In the days that followed, I began to share my story with those closest to me. I revisited the prophecies I had dismissed, studied the life of the Messiah, and began to see the Torah in a new light. This wasn't a rejection of my faith. It was a fulfillment of it. Everything I had studied, everything I had taught, now made sense in a way it never had before. If my story has touched you, I urge you to seek the truth for yourself. Open your heart to the possibility that there is more to faith than tradition, more to life than what we can see. Share this video with others. Leave a comment below, and let's start a conversation about the eternal truths that unite us all. Thank you for listening, and may you be blessed on your journey of discovery.